All right, hello and welcome to episode 1 of the Alone podcast. I am super excited today to be speaking with Justin Vititoe. Justin was a participant on season 2 of the History Channel show Alone, and I'm very excited today to visit with him and get to know him a little bit better and hear his story and a little more about who he is. So, Justin, thank you for taking the time to, I guess, virtually or remotely sit down and visit with me today. So I guess we'll throw you a softball. First of all, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing great, man. No, I appreciate you having me on. And I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, no, like I said, I appreciate you, and this is going to be a good trial run. So this is my first time doing a podcast, and we've had some. You had to drive half an hour to get to a place you can make a phone call. So this is gonna be
Yeah.
a good test run. So I think first of all, just with a little bit of background on you, if we could, I obviously did some diligence online trying to find some information about you, and there's not a whole awful lot. I think you might be the first time in my entire life where I've been able to actually get to the end of someone's Facebook. um, and so and that's saying something in 2021.
Well, so there's a little bit of backstory on that. So I got off of Facebook. I completely got off of all social media around the first of last year. So if you would have got a hold of me last year, you would have found all kinds of stuff. But I got completely off of it. And I only came back on because we recently started our own business. So it's kind of a necessary evil at this point. But I even still I get on it like once a week. So it was a nice kind of what do you call that when you come off drugs or whatever, like cleansing.
Yep. A nice detox.
But yeah, detox. That's the word I'm looking for. Thanks. But yeah, I kind of forget it's there now, so it was a good thing. But yeah.
That's funny. Well, we've got you who's been off social media for a while and just coming back, and me that uses social media to contact you. And so there's not much reach with the two of us, it sounds like right now, but
That's all right.
super excited to visit with you today. So yeah, if you could fill in maybe some color on kind of who you are and just a little bio, if you wouldn't mind, so we can have something to start with as a baseline.
Yeah, for sure. So I spent a long time in the United States Army. It's all said and done. I spent some time in the National Guard and then came active duty for the majority of it. So all said and done, it's about 16, 17 years. Most of that time I was a sniper or doing things around sniper stuff. I was an instructor down at the schoolhouse at Fort Benning. So I guess 6 years ago, I forget what year it is, 2000, almost 7 years ago, I decided to get out of the Army, which was a pretty big jump into the unknown because it was all I had really done my entire adult life. And I decided that I was going to get out of the Army. And very shortly thereafter, I got another random message on Facebook, believe it or not, saying, "Hey, we're casting for this show." And I thought it was a scam at first, right? And so I did some due diligence. I looked up the production company and everything else, and turned out it was a real production company. So I was like, okay, yeah. And I responded to the message, filled out an application. They called me, and the rest, I guess, is not to use. Well, I guess I am. I guess I am using a pun, but the
Go
rest
for
is
it.
Literally history.
Yep.
So they didn't even have a name for the show. Season 1 had just got done filming, and so we were kind of in the process of doing all our boot camp and everything, which I'm sure everybody now is kind of familiar with. Anybody who watches the show is kind of familiar with the process. But at that time, it was it was all, kind of still making it up, And so season 1 was airing as we were going through the boot camp process and all that kind of stuff. And they had, actually named the show and everything else. And this is, several months later after I had submitted the initial application. But it was kind of a strange thing, It was just, like I said, kind of a random message on Facebook that they got the ball rolling. And then I think what to them stood out about me, if I can try to speculate as to their intention, was I'm very sarcastic, for those people that do know me, but so I think that it was just kind of like my strange sense of humor and things of that nature that stood out, and wound up being on the show, and then spent 35 days out in Vancouver Island, and since that time, done a lot of stuff, but basically moved around a few more times. Did a lot of security contracting, things like that, and then now we have settled in West Virginia. We live on a mountain in the middle of nowhere. We just started our own business to where I'm going to be finally for myself teaching survival courses, more advanced stuff, and yeah, so that's where we're at. That's why I had to drive into town to get reception. So.
Well, that's fantastic, and thanks for going over that background. There's a lot to unpack there. I think we'll start. So obviously your military career is a big thing in your life. It was a lot of time, and it was definitely something that was discussed a lot on the show. Were you kind of a young guy fresh out of high school when you enlisted, or did you have
I was
something?
I was actually in high school.
Okay.
So the National Guard, I don't know if they still do it, but the National Guard used to have a program to where you could enlist in your junior year in high school, and then you would go to basic training in the summer between your junior and senior year in high school, and then you went to AIT, or your advanced training, after you graduated. So you had like a year gap. So that's what I did. And so while most people were, partying all summer, I was in the immense heat of Fort Benning, Georgia, two summers in a row. And so I kind of joined the National Guard. A friend of mine had joined. We both did the same thing, and I kind of was like unsure about it, at first, and after a little while, I was like, yeah, this is it. I knew I was probably going to get stuck in some job that I was going to hate, and there was only a few jobs that in that town I grew up in that anybody could really do, and so I just had this drive to go away. Right, I knew I needed to leave, so I wound up after I spent a couple years in the National Guard, I wound up coming active duty, and then spent almost 15 years active duty.
Okay, yeah, I that program I think still is, at least it was in existence like 10 years ago. But did your parents have to sign off? Were you that young?
Yeah. I was 17 when I first joined. Yeah, my dad had to sign off. My dad was in the Navy for a few years. Both my parents were really supportive about it. I think they knew that I was not the kind of person that was just gonna be able to go through a normal life,
Yeah, gotcha. That's interesting. Yeah, it's funny. My buddies that were guard and they did some of the same stuff. They wouldn't appreciate it. They'd come back from whatever, and I'd ask them how their weekend camping trip was. That usually went over like a red balloon, or a lead balloon rather. Sorry, they didn't find that to be funny, but But hey, I enjoyed it. So you did military, joined obviously very young, spent quite a bit of time in the military. And did you go, so I guess your AIT, did you start directly as a sniper MOS, or what did you do, and what was your career through the military like, if we can get into that a little bit?
Yeah. So no. In the armies, the sniper is not an MOS. So it's a kind of an additional skill set to go through the school, and then there are specific jobs that are sniper jobs, right?
Okay.
So when I first went through AIT and everything, it was just as an infantryman. So then when I came active duty, my first duty station was up at Fort Drum, New York, which is a horrible, horrible place. If you get a chance to go, just pass. I say that the unit was actually really good, but the weather is just ridiculous. So I'm originally from Kentucky, and so having 4 or 5 foot of snow on the ground was a big culture shock for me, But no, over I spent about 2 years up there, and my platoon sergeant was actually used to be an instructor at the sniper school, and so I think in retrospect, I think maybe that was kind of an influence on my decision making process. So I spent a couple of years in Fort Drum, and then I wound up moving down to Fort Campbell. And when I went to Fort Campbell, I basically, before I signed in, I went to the scout platoon and interviewed for a position there. Got hired on, for lack of a better term, or selected, and spent about, I don't know, a few months, 6-9 months as a scout before moving over to the sniper section. And once I moved over to the sniper section, I just kind of fell in love. And it's a weird thing for most snipers I know that have done it for a long time. It's kind of the same story with most of us. We find it through one way or another, and once you fall in love with that job, it's the only thing you ever want to do. Realistically, I got kind of promoted out of position, and that's rough. But I got lucky because I was able to go back to sniper school, as an instructor, and still remain in the community and everything else. And in a lot of ways, I've been involved in the community even getting out of the Army. So it's still a lot of the instructors, down there at one time were former students of mine. People in that, still talk a lot to people in that arena that are still active duty. So.
Yeah, I want to maybe shed some light on something you mentioned there, and I'm, as I mentioned to you when I approached you, I'm not an expert on much of anything, but so if I say this wrong, correct me. But I think something that's interesting that people might not understand about the military, unless you've got some amount of knowledge, is that you can have a job, right? So let's say for you, obviously you were a sniper, so you can have a job. And you can get to a point where you've been doing that job so long and so well that in the natural progression of your military career, you get promoted, and then you're too valuable or whatever to be able to do that job anymore. And so it's kind of an interesting thing you said, that you got promoted out of it, that people don't understand. Right. Is that you can have a skill set and you can do a thing in the military, and it can be your kind of your life. But at some point you have to make a choice whether you continue having a career or you end with the job you love. Is that accurate?
And a lot of times you don't even have a choice, really. It's the Army has a tendency to just move people around. So you might get transferred to another duty station where that job is not open, or there's not that job, right? So say that you work at McDonald's and you love making burgers, man. Like, you become the best burger maker on the planet, and a manager leaves and they're like, hey, we need you to fill in as this manager, and then you do a great job as a manager, right? So you're still in that world of flipping burgers, but you're not actually doing the flipping. And then you just continue to go up the ladder to where now all of a sudden you're going to maybe a McDonald's in some other country where they don't have burgers, right? So you're like, well, I'm still doing what the corporation wants me to do, and I'm still trying to do it as best as I can, but I really want to flip burgers, you know what I mean? So it's very similar. I think a lot of the problem is the translation, right? So a lot of things in the Army or the military are similar to the civilian world. They're just they're explained different. So a lot of people have a hard time understanding them, and we as military folks do a really horrible job explaining in civilian terms, what we're actually talking about.
Yeah, and this is kind of a tangent, but I know something that you're passionate about, and it was, on your season of Alone, you talked about quite a bit, was veteran resources and help for veterans, and I think unfortunately that difficulty translating it also extends into translating skill sets and everything else, and it's kind of part of the challenge I think that some of our veterans face. So that's
it absolutely does, and I think if there was I'd hate to say if there was only one thing, but I think one thing that the military could do a whole lot better is, as guys are getting out or girls are getting out, is to give them realistic expectations of how their skills transfer, right? So I think that's a big thing, because you feel lost a lot of times and alone, because you only know how to translate those skills into military terminology, right? So as an 11 Bravo, as a sniper, as all this stuff, right? I get out of the Army, and it's very easy to think to myself, well, I'm just good at being really sneaky and pulling a trigger, right? So, like, what am I going to do in the civilian world, right? But what a lot of guys getting out don't understand is, me as a senior E7, right? As getting out, and I had 40, 50 people underneath of me, right? I had not just to account for their work life, but for their every waking moment life, right? So those skills, and from a management perspective, like, that's almost transferring into like company ownership. You know what I mean? Like, there's very few people in the civilian world that have 40, 50 people underneath of them. Yep. And that are in charge of that type of management, right? So even a younger guy, say a young sergeant getting out as a team leader, you have 4 or 5 people underneath of you. That's management now in the civilian world, and I think a lot of times it's a translation issue. Yep. A lot of people don't understand how to translate the skill sets that they've actually learned, not just, crawling around in the mud, or not just pulling a trigger, or not just doing this, but, your critical thinking, your drive, your ability to accomplish tasks and accomplish them well without guidance. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people in the civilian world looking for those skill sets. And, it's, I think there's a lot of people now starting to hire veterans, because of that. They understand that there's a lot more to offer than just, what's on their resume.
Yeah, instead of hey, I was an infantry team leader for 4 years or whatever it may be, I'm a skilled leader that works well under high pressure. I can adapt
Right.
to evolving and rapidly changing situations, and X, Y, and Z. I think that makes a lot of
Yeah,
sense.
that actually sounds. You want to write my resume? That sounded good.
Yeah, I'll put that together for you. We'll throw that in for an extra $5. How about that?
That sounds perfect.
So with sniper training, I've obviously never been through that. I've seen some things and understand that there's some very intense training that you go through. You mentioned being sneaky, right? With your sniper training, is there survival class that comes into the sniper training? Did they put you guys through SEER school, which for those that aren't familiar, so SEER is basically the military survive, evade, resist, escape survival school that they put pilots, special operators, other people that are going to be in certain situations through. What did that look like for you all?
So it's actually funny, you mentioned that. So SEER school, I was not able to attend, and one of the reasons is as you said, it's primarily for special operations, pilots, stuff like that. Now, people that are in certain units, different things, in the, as we say, conventional Army, will sometimes get an opportunity to go to SEER school, but it's kind of rare, and it's kind of hard to get a slot for school, right? And so at the time that I went through sniper school, there was almost nothing as far as survival whatsoever. Like there was nothing, right? I think we had like a PowerPoint presentation that lasted half an hour on tracking. That was it, right? And so that was one of the things, like when I became an instructor, and I don't know how they're doing it now, but when I became an instructor, that was one of the things that I really took to heart, and made sure that there was at least a day included in the curriculum, right? And that was just a day, but it was at least something. And so it was one of my interests, or my interest level in survival and tracking and all these things actually came out of that, but in a different way than people would think, right? It came out of a absence of that training and seeing the necessity for that training, right? So as a sniper section leader, I had eight guys underneath of me, and I was in charge of the sniper section for my battalion. And so I needed survival training for my guys. I couldn't get any SEER school slots. I couldn't, get anything of that nature. So what I did was I made friends with my battalion chain of command, and I convinced them to allow me to go out and find a civilian instructor to come in and teach us this stuff, right? So I made them understand why this was necessary, why it was important, and the fact that we weren't able to get it through the Army system, right? So I wound up getting a hold of a gentleman named Kevin Reeve, who's still teaching, by the way. He teaches, his school is On Point Tactical Tracking. And that was, other than, just doing random stuff, that was my first kind of real, big push into the survival stuff. And I wound up going up to one of Kevin's courses, absolutely loved it. Just went by myself as to kind of fill him out, see what was going on, and absolutely loved it. And then I wound up bringing him down to teach a combination tracking and survival course for my section, and it was awesome. But that kind of started the ball rolling on the survival side. I became a lot more interested in it. I became a lot more inundated with, a lot of that stuff, and started practicing those skill sets a lot more.
Gotcha. And I think you might have mentioned this, but has the training changed today? Do they get, what does that look like for someone who's going through sniper training today?
Yeah, it's a constantly evolving thing. I think you know it, the course has changed from my understanding. I can't speak 100% to the nature of the course, but
For multiple
um,
reasons, I'm sure.
well, I mean, there's a lot of different weapon systems. There's a lot of different
Yeah.
different things. One of the I actually I know the guy that's the NCOIC down there now. Absolutely great dude. So I can say that if there are things that aren't up to snuff or have fallen by the wayside, that he's the guy to fix it. So I am extremely optimistic about that. But it is things need to change. One of the things that I'm actually offering, not to get into a sales pitch, but one of the things I'm actually offering for military and law enforcement is an advanced fieldcraft course. And what I have noticed in the realm of snipers and just the military at large is there's a lot of emphasis put on technology. There's a lot of emphasis put on this, that, or the other thing, and a lot of the lessons that were learned before my time, during my time, are all but forgotten. As far as fieldcraft, as far as being able to be sneaky, for lack of a better term. But and then not even to mention the stuff that was around hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago. So one of the things that I hope to do with that course in particular is be able to kind of have a revival of a lot of those skill sets, and to show them how important these things are still today on a modern battlefield. Because I tell people in that world all the time, guns are going to change, technology is going to change. Since the beginning of warfare, there has always been and there will always be a need for individuals who are sneaky. Right? There is, bar none. That will always be a need. So I think it's important to hold on to those skill sets, and I think it's important to not let them get glossed over by the advance of technology.
Yeah, well, in a little bit here, I hope we'll get some time, or we will make some time to talk about what you're doing now, and we can share where you're at. Because I wanted to get into that, and as you were talking, the light bulb started clicking of like, Justin's a couple steps ahead of your average person here. So smart thinking on that end, and it's interesting you mention these skills, and obviously this evolves, right? I'm sure that coming out of the the 60s and 70s that the military schools were very different, and there's probably a lot more survival based on the theater and how
Right.
we had to operate in that theater.
Right.
And then as we've progressed, I recognize that right now the Middle East and specifically Afghanistan is a topic. That's a light way to put it, but you look at that theater of operations, and you might have someone who's sitting on a building for a couple of days, and then a week later he's getting dropped off in the mountains with a small group of people. So that kind of presents an interesting challenge, not only for training but also for keeping yourself prepared for a two completely different operations, I would assume.
No, absolutely. And I think that's been one of our, I don't want to say mistakes, but it's been one of our mistakes as a military, is that we perpetually focus on the war that we're in. And what we don't do very well is get a really good baseline of skill sets that we need, and then flex for the war that we're in, right? So we totally focus on Iraq, or we totally focus on Afghanistan, and we're stuff falls by the wayside, right? So when you do have a war that's not in a desert, or not in mountains or whatever, then you got to relearn all those lessons. Where if you would have just kept the baseline, and I think we just do that as humans, if you would have kept that baseline and, kind of just flexed for that period of time, and then, you're able to right the ship a lot faster.
Yeah, maybe we're not as good of being tools today as we would have been 100 years ago, right? You gotta, if you're a tool, you keep yourself ready and you adapt for what you need to do. That's a really interesting perspective, actually, and that's something I'm gonna have to think on a little bit for myself. So I appreciate that. So your military experience gained a lot of knowledge and just life in that. You got out, did the alone thing. I kind of want to touch on where you're at now. We mentioned earlier that half-hour drive to get cell service today and West Virginia. So is that something that, is this a recent thing for you to be, I don't want to say that far out, but I mean, I think anymore you have to work pretty hard to get half an hour away from cell service. So is that something that you've been doing for a while? Is that a change since your experience on alone? Is that, you kind of talk us through that?
Yeah, so we've been up here for about a year and a half, and it just kind of worked out timing wise and everything else, with jobs and everything else. So me and my wife were kind of going back and forth on some different options or whatever, and my parents have had this land up here for 20 plus years and just never done anything on it. And so, we kind of kept going back and forth, and I kind of looked at her one night. We were living in Huntsville, Alabama at the time. And I kind of looked at her one night and I was like, why are we scared? And she was like, I don't know. And I think we both had a realization that wasn't who we wanted to be, of, just being scared of the unknown. And so we made the decision right then. And I think like a month later, we packed up all our stuff, which wasn't a whole lot. Started getting rid of a bunch of stuff and moved up here. The first month and a half, so we moved up March 1st of last year, right? Of right before or right as COVID hit. But for the first month and a half, we lived in a tent. And that was interesting with a 3-year-old, but and a dog. But it was great. We debated on building our own cabin or this, that, the other thing. What we actually wound up doing was getting one of those like sheds that people use for like a workspace or whatever, like build your own shed. You see them on the side of the interstate all the time. Right, so we got a 12 by 20 one of those, and we were able to kind of build it how we wanted to build it. The reason it took like a month because of the weather to actually get up to our mountain. But so we bought that thing, they brought it and delivered it, and then I took rough cut lumber, completed the inside of it, did the walls, the bathroom cabinets, all that, the beds, and that's what we've been living in since, and we love it. It's kind of like, I guess the terminology now is like a tiny house, like we're being eco-friendly.
Look at you, all trendy, man.
Yeah, I know. It's trying to be all friendly to the environment. Truth is, like, I'm just not going to spend a bunch of money on a place just so I can sleep there. But no, we're completely off grid. I don't know. I don't know what like definitions are weird.
Right.
Like,
yeah,
we don't have a power and water hookup, right? So I say completely off grid, and people are like, well, how are you on a cell phone then? Like, okay, I'm not hiding from the satellites, bro. Like, I'm just saying, like, I don't have any bills,
Yep.
other than my cell phone and my car. But we kind of chosen to live our life the way we want to live it, and I think that's an important thing for people. I don't care who it is. Like I I I would hope that anybody listening to this, like if you get anything out of it, like live how you want to live, not because your neighbor expects this or that or the other thing or whatever, like one of the reasons that we stayed in a tent was specifically for that reason, so we could figure out what we wanted, not what we had to have because that's normal, but what amenities or whatever that we wanted. So like this year we bought an air conditioner. We run off a generator when we turn the air conditioner on, stuff like that, because it was really hot last summer, so it's those points of things. But like, I'm not going to air condition my house just because that's normal. That's what we're supposed to do. I air condition my house because it's hot in the summer. You know what I mean? And I think you wind up cutting out a lot of stuff. TV is not that important for us. We watch like maybe a movie a week or whatever. So, things like that, we don't really miss it. We'll stay at a hotel or something, and we're like, we'll turn the TV on, and 5 minutes later, I'm like, yep, I'm done. Like I forgot how annoying this thing is, but no, I think it's been a weird trip, since the show to kind of get to this point, because I was absolutely miserable when I was living in the city, and that's a whole long story about why. But I think in particular, once you've been in nature for an extended period of time, and I don't know, I can't put a number of days on that, because I think it's different for everybody, but it's really hard to go back to normal life. And normal life is a lot noisier than in a bad way, than a lot of people realize, because they're so used to it, right?
Yeah, it's funny. So my wife and I, we were a long time ago, we were looking at a small town, and we went up to visit that small town. So we rented some nice lady's basement, and we went to sleep in her basement the first night. And
that's not weird at all.
It was, well, I was fine. It was so dark because there wasn't city, and it was so quiet,
right? Because
we were in the middle of nowhere, that my wife had a hard time sleeping, right? Because there was zero noise, zero interference, zero distraction. It was just so slow, and it was it was great, but it was it's a shock. So do you think?
That's one of the things that everybody said. Like if you go to the mountains or whatever, like that's one of the things everybody says. Like, oh, it's so quiet. Well, that's normal. Like that's supposed to be normal, right? Like all this, it's not supposed to be ridiculously loud. Like the earth is not supposed to be just constantly humming with all these noises, that we choose to ignore. It's supposed to be, you're supposed to hear crickets. You're supposed to see the Milky Way when you look up in the stars at night, like.
Yeah, and to think that there are people that will never see the Milky Way. That's a life-changing experience. If you've never seen the Milky Way, go find dark sky.
They see it right next to the Snickers bar. That's about it.
Right. If you've never seen the real one, go find some dark sky, lay on your back, stare at that for a while, and think about your life. I mean, it's a thing. I mean, do you think that you would have ended up where you are without the alone experience? I mean, was that where your life was going to take you anyways, or did that time with yourself did that change something in you that took you there?
So I will try not to do the 2-hour answer to that question. So there's a commonality that I wound up finding by accident because of the show, right? And so what I mean by that is that when I got out of the military, I missed war, right? I missed being in Iraq or being in Afghanistan. I missed it, right? And there was this draw, this compulsion, this overwhelming urge to go back. And for anybody that's done that, you probably know what I'm talking about. For anybody that hasn't, it's really difficult to explain, right? And so it's like a compulsion that you just can't shake. And it was so much that there was a couple times where I almost did go back on the civilian side, and I kind of thought better of it and wound up not. But so I think a lot of guys rationalize that because, you think, well, oh, okay, well, it was the camaraderie or it was this or that or the other thing, right? So when I got done with Alone, the first couple of weeks, like, I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't want to see anybody. And I wound up talking to a friend of mine who had been through kind of similar experience, and he kind of helped me through, getting back into society and all that kind of stuff and breaking out of my bubble. But I kind of went to that same place in my mind, that same cave, so to speak, in my mind. And the other weird thing was there was the same draw, the same compulsion, the same feeling, but instead of going back to war, it was going to the woods and being completely away from everything, right? And so, but the draw, the magnetic pull was the same. And so I struggled with that for a while. I was like, how could, they're polar opposite things. On one end, you're with a bunch of people, and on the other end, you're completely by yourself. Like, how can I be attracted to these things the same? And what I finally realized was what I was actually attracted to, and what I think a lot of guys that are going through those emotions are attracted to, is you're attracted to the simplicity. You are attracted to it because you have stepped through, on a subconscious level, you have stepped through the looking glass. Your subconscious mind has realized, oh, this is how I'm supposed to operate as a human being. I'm supposed to wake up. I'm supposed to worry about not dying. I'm supposed to worry about eating. I'm supposed to, deal with the problems at hand. I'm not supposed to be stressed out about my neighbor's lawn being greener than mine. I'm not supposed to be stressed out about taxes. I'm not supposed to hear all these weird noises. I'm not supposed to, do all of these things. I am wired as a human being to live a more simplistic, as we would look at it, life. And I think once you have an experience to where you kind of go through that portal, you kind of step through that looking glass, and you see that on a subconscious level, your subconscious level is always trying to get back there. And you might not realize it on a conscious level, right? But your subconscious is producing that gravitational pull. It's producing that draw that's telling you, no, go, this is not right. Like, none of this stuff is right. Go back to when it was the way it was supposed to be, right? And so that's just what I personally believe. I might not be right, but that's what I personally believe. So, in dealing with, PTSD and things like that, for this specific, stuff, for, war or whatever, a lot of people that have never been to war, they look at it and they say, well, that had to be traumatic. And for some people it is, for some people it truly is. And there's different events that they have to go through or whatever that traumatize them. Right. And in dealing with PTSD, you can deal with those specific events. But I spent almost 4 years, throughout Iraq and Afghanistan. That's not not a specific event. That's a changing of lifestyle, right? And so for a long time, I was like, I don't have PTSD because there was nothing traumatic. Like there was nothing to me that traumatized me from Iraq or Afghanistan. There was none of those things were traumatizing. I would go back and do them again in a heartbeat, right? And so what I finally realized is there was trauma, but the problem is that the trauma is what you and everybody listening to this calls normal life, right? The trauma is that I see the world differently now, on a very deep level, and my subconscious won't let me go back to saying like, oh, this is fine. Like, no, it's not fine anymore, you know? And so when I'm on my mountain, there's no trauma, you know what I mean? When I have to get reintroduced into normal, quote unquote, then it's that same trauma all over again, right? So it becomes this thing of, well, how do you treat that when you're still living that trauma, when you're still, you know, being surrounded by all these things that your subconscious brain is telling you, no, this ain't right, Bubba. Like, you ain't supposed to be here. You know, that creates a whole nother dynamic, right? And so, you know, one of the other things that's hard to deal with that is escapism. You know, so for me, there's times where I spend a week or more and I don't come off the mountain. I say that like it's both literal and just kind of a term we use up here of coming off the mountain, right? And so like, but literally it is, you know, like coming off the mountain and going into town. But yeah, there's times where, you know, I'll spend an exorbitant amount of time and I don't necessarily, you know, do anything crazy, but I stay out. I stay on the mountain. So it's strange, man. So it's trying to find that balance now, you know, it's trying to find that balance to where, I'm able to kind of deal with the normalcy of society when I have to deal with it. But by the same token, I'm in my happy place for the most of it, you know?
Yeah, it's funny as you're talking. We're gonna try and I think keep this to about an hour so you can get back to your life. But I'm realizing, my goodness, this guy needs like volumes to speak through your stuff. I think to touch on something that you mentioned there is, I was speaking with an individual that I'm close to a little while ago, and they've had a long law enforcement career, and they're to the point where they could retire if they chose to. And we were talking about that retirement and you know, what do you go to, and you're talking about this, you know, the shock is the real world. It's not where you were. It's like, yeah, how do you find purpose, right? Like, how do you find purpose and meaning, and how do you find yourself, you know, going out and investigating some dude for insurance fraud because he's out of work, but he's, you know, with a bad back, but he's out building a fence or something, you know? How do you find meaning in that when you've spent such a long time doing something so meaningful? And I think that probably plays into what you're kind of talking about, right? Is the trauma is the life that we're currently living, not necessarily the life that we have lived historically for thousands of years.
Right.
So.
Well, and I think we lose a lot, and you know, I think you hit the nail on the head. You know, it comes down to a lot of guys ask themselves, well, what's my purpose, right? And it's not clearly defined anymore. And so over the past couple of years, I've done a lot of changing, you know, the way I think about things and the way I do things and whatever. And I had an experience out in Utah a couple of years ago where I probably should have died. And the only reason I didn't die was because the guy that was kind of leading the excursion, his name's Dave Holliday. If you're know much about survival stuff. He's kind of like one of the godfathers of modern day survival stuff. Dude's been living it for, I don't know, 40, 50 years. But yeah, so the only reason that I'm sitting here talking to you was because he got told to leave a fire when, out there, places like Utah, you don't just leave fires, right? And, something told him to leave that fire. And me and the guy I was with, we found it a little bit later, but, we were right on the brink of hypothermia and probably would have died. I mean, not probably, we would have died if we hadn't found that fire. And that's a whole long story, but the point being is that after that, I was like, okay, I need to start listening to whatever he's communicating with, right? And so I try not to put things in boxes, because I feel like boxes with definitions inadvertently turn people off, right? So if I were to say that was God, right, then some people would be turned off by that. If I were to say like, oh well, that was the universe talking, and some people will be turned off by that. So I'm prefacing it in this way. I believe it was God, but I if another person doesn't, if they think it was something else, great, man. Like, I'm not going to sit here and argue with you about it.
The end result is the same, right?
Right. At the end of the day, what it was is that, I'm still alive because somebody listened to something bigger than themselves, right? And so what I have strived to do is start listening, my own self. And since I've done that, my life has been guided more toward trying to help people in a lot of different ways, but even just random stuff. But and then as well, it has kind of renewed that purpose, right? So I know my reason that I was put on this earth is to help people. Now, what I choose to do with that and how I choose to listen, sometimes they're two entirely different things, man. Some days I don't want to listen. You know what I mean? Like, and some days, I feel like I have to. So I think for a lot of people, if they could try to listen, and communicate with that entity, whether it's God for them, whether it's the universe, whatever you want to call it, in today's modern day and age. But I really don't care what you want to call it. But to me, it has been unequivocally proved to myself that there is something bigger in the world connecting us, and therefore, even on a logical standpoint, like, it makes sense to try and look out for your fellow man. Now some people just either don't deserve it or don't yeah, let's just put it that way. They don't deserve it. But there's a lot of people out there that might need just a kind word, man. Or help opening a door, or what, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. It doesn't have to be anything whatever. But I think, when you get that feeling inside, or that little voice in your head saying, hey, you need to go do this, like, don't question it. Don't whatever, just go do it. And you'll find that when you start going down that path, that your life takes a lot of different, weird twists and turns. But, like I said, the only reason I'm talking to you right now is because 2 years ago, 60-something-year-old man, he didn't question it. He didn't rationalize why he should or shouldn't do it. He just said, okay, yep, I'm going to do that.
Amen, man. I kind of got lost in your story there.
That's the abridged version. That's the super short version.
Yeah, no, I can tell. Like I said, I said volumes, and maybe libraries is what we're gonna have to come back to at some point. It's funny. My wife and I yesterday we had a very long conversation about the concept of purpose and listening when you get that feeling, and I would agree with you. I would call that a spiritual prompting from a deity. But yeah, I mean, how for you, how have you found you've been able to tap into that and listen? Because I think, if someone is spiritually inclined, that's probably the age-old question, right? And whatever it may be, how have you tapped into that and found your way to hear and listen?
Well, so I'm still working on it, right? So I'm about the most unspiritually inclined person you ever meet in your life, right? So for years and years and years, like I was pretty much as close as an atheist as you could get, right? And like I think about things very pragmatically and very more on a scientific side, right? So you got to kind of prove to me that that something exists. Like I'm not just going to believe it because you said. And so, that thing out in that event out in Utah that I was describing, like that was a huge catalyst for me to start. And since then, I guess for me, it's been differentiating the feeling of when something is speaking to me, telling me to do something, versus when my own intuition or my own inclination is to do something, right? And what I found is they're very different. At least for me personally, those two things are very different. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, I should do that, but it's it's fine, whatever. Like I'm not going to do it. And other times I feel like if you don't do this, like you are going to regret it for the rest of your life. Like there's no not doing it. Like you have to do it, right? The feeling is that strong. And I think the hang up, at least for me, has been in the past of not knowing what the end result was going to be, not knowing what the outcome was going to be, right? And not knowing the secondary and tertiary effects. And then therefore I'm like, well, it's not worth my time. Well, you don't know whether it's worth your time, right? So still to this day, I guess from the reruns or whatever, I guess looking back on it, this is what happened to me when I climbed the mountain on the show. Is I felt I didn't go out there with the intent of doing that, right? So I think it was like day 12 or something like that this idea hit me, and I was like, I have to do this. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. It was like, I have to do this. And even in that state, and even in that, everything, I didn't understand the full extent of what I was doing. I understood that I was doing it. I understood that something inside of me was telling me that I had to do it, but I had no way of knowing what that was going to mean to so many people.
Yeah, I'm gonna back up for just a second. I'm gonna stick a pin in where you ended with how that meant so much to so many people, and I think obviously this podcast is called the Alone Podcast, and the target audience obviously is going to be people that have watched the show. But what Justin's referencing is, and Justin, you'll be able to better fill in the blanks, but Alone, if you aren't intimately familiar with the show, is basically a show that at the end of the day you're balancing what you're doing with what you're doing physically with what you're taking in, right? That's kind of what the show boils down to in a lot of instances. And
right, it's slowly dying.
Yeah, effectively
you're watching people slowly die.
That's the less ginger way to put it. Yeah, you're watching people starve, and when you're in that situation, every calorie that you expend has to be worth something. And so Justin made the decision, and again, correct me where I'm wrong, but he made the decision to climb the basically the highest observation point in his area, and went and did that. And I'm assuming that you expended, probably more calories in that one endeavor than you might have taken in almost in your whole time on the show. And
probably.
And
I mean, I've done similar climbs and actually calculated it, in a previous life when I used to count calories and things like that. And I mean, you're looking at upwards of probably 5 to 10,000 calories easy. So yeah, easy. I expended way more than I took in probably the whole time.
Yeah, and just you did that with a purpose, and I believe that purpose was, veteran awareness and veteran suicide, and shining a light on really this mental health epidemic that's going through our military. And for me, that was something that I've always remembered, right? And I've always remembered that moment of that show. And so just to kind of color the story of what you did, and so you can pick up again where you were talking about how you had that thought and you did it and didn't realize it was going to be so meaningful for so many people. So you can just, if you want to just continue on with your story, I just want to make sure that background was there for people.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the one part about it was to raise awareness. And I think at that time, and it's kind of hard to even fathom now, because there's so much awareness raised about the 22 suicides a day, and I don't even know what the number is anymore. I don't know if they've released anything, but part of it at that time was to raise awareness, but a bigger part of it was, as I couldn't really put it into words at the time, but was to just an attempt to provide some level of motivation, some physical thing that a person could watch, and they could that if they're going through that, they could remind themselves of, right? And so I think things like that are important. For instance, I have the last 3 lines of a poem written by Robert Frost tattooed on my forearm. It's a visual representation. It's a reminder, right? Because I knew I wanted to do something. I could have sat there, and just set my shelter on camera and talked about it. And that might have done something for somebody, but I felt like it had to be something tangible. It had to be something, and it was, I guess, metaphoric or whatever, but but it had to be something actual that I did to kind of help. And I got to give, as much as a lot of us, tend to complain about the editing and everything else. Like, I got to give the production company props on the way they edited that, and the way they produced that, because it took up almost that whole episode. Like, it was, they really went into it, not just as they went into it for the right reasons. You know what I mean? There was even a blurb at the end about, resources and stuff. But yeah, I still, to this day, I'll get, random messages from people, saying like, man, I really appreciate that. And, it kind of, help me, veer down a different course or whatever. And, hard telling how many people haven't messaged me but have had that same experience, and like, so I guess, going back to my original point, is that I didn't set out intending on reaching that many people, right? I didn't set out. I didn't know what they were going to edit. I didn't know how they were going to, that could have been a 20-second video clip. They're like, oh, Justin climbed a mountain. Look at that idiot, right?
He ended his time on alone, dummy.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, like, I didn't know how that was going to get portrayed. So, and so I think, going in back to what we were talking about listening and about your normal life, you don't know the secondary and tertiary effects of a nice word. You don't know how that's going to change a person's life and how that person's going to change another person's life, and so on and so forth. I think there's actually a term for that, like whatever. But, I think if you can do nothing else, just try and be helpful, try to help people, try and be good. And, and whether or not how that takes a turn in your specific life, it'll either change things or it won't, but I think that's probably the best way to start listening, is to get in that mindset of, hey man, like we're all humans, right? And I think as polarized as we are, specifically as a country, we look for every single thing we can to divide ourselves, right? We're like, I don't care whether it's the clothes you wear, the color of your skin, the amount of money you make, whether you've had a shot or not a shot, or whether you like donkeys or elephants or what it is, man. Like we are so so polarized. And I actually saw a cool meme today. It was like it was like groups of people arguing, and then it kind of kept pulling back and pulling back and pulling back. It was a cartoon, but eventually it got back to where Earth was just like a speck, right? And all the stuff that they were arguing about, you couldn't see that picture anymore. You couldn't see that blurb, and you just saw space. And I think we forget sometimes that we are inhabitants. All of us are inhabitants of an Earth. And even if we scale that down to our state or our city or our whatever, right? We're still just this little speck, and so I think, even like I said, even from a logical standpoint, if you really dial it down and you really go down the rabbit hole of how that works, like the logical conclusion is that as much as possible we should be good to each other. And like I said, there's outliers to that. There's people that don't deserve it, but there's a lot of people that do, man. And I think we spend way too much time worrying about stuff we shouldn't be worried about, and not worrying about the things that we really should be worried about, and that's helping each other out.
Yeah, this is fantastic, and I feel bad. I feel like we're kind of at a point where to really put an emphasis on what you've said here, because it's really profound, and I think you're a good example of someone who's living a life with purpose, for one, and someone who has a lot to offer to your fellow man. It'd be a great point to just stop and put a pin in that. I do want to talk about a few more things and give us some time, and then we'll wrap up, because I think that we've probably just reached the most important point of our conversation, and I appreciate that.
Well, I will say one more thing, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
About all that. So, like, I think a lot of times, when myself or another person, and this kind of goes back to what we were talking about before we started the episode, but I think a lot of times when myself or another person speaks, and other people listen, and they're like, "Oh man, this guy's got it all together," and they're yay for that dude or whatever, or however they feel about that. So I will just add the caveat of, I'm just a normal person, man. Like, I don't have my stuff together every day, all day. There's rough days. There's times when I feel lost, right? So I feel like that sometimes, we only show people the good. We only show them, it's the Instagram syndrome, right? We're only showing like the cool stuff in our life, right? And we don't show those hardships. And so when other people look at that, they can say, well, man, I don't live like that. I don't get to, do this or that or the other thing. And, I would just say to anybody listening to this, like, it's not all sunshine and rainbows all the time. You know what I mean? It's work. You have to put in, if you want to be happy, you have to put in the work, and look out for yourself and try to do things that are going to do that. But it's not going to be like this magical, mystical moment where unicorns come out with ice cream cones, and that's just how you live all the time, And I think that's one of the things about, like living up here. People, either we get two reactions. Either one, people I think like low key think we're crazy, or two, they're like, oh man, that's awesome. Like I wish I could do that. I really, like that would be my dream or whatever. And yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff, but by the same token, there's a lot of hard stuff too. You know what I mean?
Say, those people have never put up a winter's worth of firewood, huh?
Right. You don't have to walk out in the snow and empty the bucket that you went to the bathroom in. Like those, like there's just a lot of stuff that doesn't get thrown out. And so that's the only thing I would want to add. Is just when you listen to people, whether it's me or whether you listen to whoever that kind of gives you that like, yeah, I can do this. Here's a motivational, like. That's all well and good, man, but you have to realize that they have bad days too. You know what I mean? It's not just because you have a bad day or just because you have a bad week or whatever doesn't mean like you've fallen off the rails. It just means you got to get back up and keep going.
I think that's an excellent reminder, and an excellent reminder for me. I mean, I think an interesting side effect of, call it the digital age or whatever, we all have the ability, like right now I'm talking to you, right, about your experience in your life, and this will be shared with who knows how many people, right, whether that's 1 or 100, but we're getting a very specific picture of Justin. And for me, I found myself a couple years ago, I got really heavy into running, right, and I was listening and consuming running media, trying to find ways to become better. And that eventually disillusioned me with a lot of the current, media, because I started realizing, I was like, wait a minute, I'm listening to people who are like winning races at a distance of 100 miles, right?
Yeah.
And they're telling me their experience, and I'm listening to them. And I'm at a point where I'm running yeah, right, I'm at a point where I'm able to do 20 miles through the mountains. I think I'm a little bit disillusioned, and I think I'm hearing things that I'm probably not prepared for yet.
Right.
Because we're constantly bombarded with hearing from the expert and hearing from that person who has their perfect life put together.
Well, yeah, and you just see the good, man. You just see that smiling face as they're crossing the finish line. Or you see that cool picture of them, looking all ripped up, running really fast or whatever. Like, you don't feel their pain. You know what I mean? Like, anything that's worth having comes with pain, like bar none, And so if it's something you want, if you want to be an ultra marathoner, right? If you want to be happy, if you want to, whatever it is, whatever that is, there's going to be some pain attached. And if there's not any pain, then you're probably not getting the fullest extent of it. You're probably not feeling that as deep as you could.
Yeah, and a good caution and reminder that if you're listening to someone who's got everything that looks perfect, that there's a whole different story behind that, and hopefully that's what I'm gonna try and convey. But I really appreciate your time and your insights. This is something that I'm excited to listen back to, actually, and be able to just listen and not have to be processing and thinking through, right? Tell us a little bit about what you're doing, and I know that you've started your business, and you've got a Facebook page. If you want to tell us where to find you, I can I think it's Bear Mountain, if I'm remembering correctly. But
yeah, it's Bear Mountain Survival, named after our dog, who is his name is Bear. We also have Bear on our mountain, but no, our yeah. So that's the business, Bear Mountain Survival. We're out of Heaters, West Virginia, but yeah, there's a Facebook page. Hopefully, in the next month or so, we'll be getting our website up and running to where people can enroll on the website and life is easy and don't have to worry about all that kind of stuff. So I am not doing that myself. I'm outsourcing it to a guy that's really good at that. So, but yeah, so we are focusing on advanced courses. And by advanced, I mean we're taking basic skill sets and applying them to real life things, right? So I think one of the bubbles that I've seen, one of the gaps that I've seen in the survival community as I've been a part of it for these last few years is that most people just teach basic courses. And that's great. Like we're actually going to have a page on our website that has like Friends of Bear Mountain. So if you're looking for a basic course, you can go on there and kind of, find somebody that we trust, that teaches good stuff, and it'll be a resource to be able to find them. But there's so much of that. There's so many awesome instructors out there doing that kind of stuff. And it's just really not what I wanted to do. Right. So, what I do is I take those skill sets, but I apply them very directly into other real life things, right? So, for instance, the course we got coming up in October, it's a minimalist travel course, right? So we teach people how to go and a longer distance with less stuff and still be comfortable, right? So you're using survival skill sets, but it translates to if you're a hunter, if you're a fisherman, if you're a hiker, if you're whatever you like to do outdoors, how do I, decrease the amount of stuff I'm walking around with, increase my comfort level, and increase my enjoyment level because I can go further, faster, over obstacles, whatever. And so it's about trying to do those types of things, about trying to take skill sets and put them in a place where they can actually be transferred to real life. And then through that, be able to take ideas and concepts and then bring that back to your actual daily life, right? So your work life, your relationship life, whatever it is, how do you take, concepts and bring them in and make your life fuller. And so that's really where my passion lies in now, is being able to do that kind of stuff and do more advanced courses. So, ideally, and this is not a prerequisite, but ideally I want to become the place that people that have already gone and taken, these other courses can come to and get a more advanced side of it. Right. So they're not just learning the same things that they already know. They're not going over, the same regurgitation of information. They're learning something on a much deeper level.
That's cool. For your travel class, I just have to ask, are PT shorts and sandals required for your Go Light?
They are not required, but they are highly encouraged.
Highly encouraged. There you go.
Highly encouraged. Pants are optional.
There you go. That's if you don't know what we're laughing about there, go ahead and watch season 2 of Alone. Go spend some time with Justin and his short PT shorts and sandals.
Man, those were actually the longest pair I had.
Oh, mercy!
I saved the viewers.
Don't start a YouTube channel, my friend. Don't start a YouTube channel. I think I read somewhere that your class, or at least you have something going on that's geared towards military and law enforcement as well. Is that kind of your whole reference, or is that kind of a different side of Bear Mountain that you're building out?
No. So that will be a right now. There's only right now there's only one specific class that is tailored for military and law enforcement, and that's the advanced fieldcraft course. And that's more of a by request. I probably next year I will do one, but that's more like your unit or your department gets a hold of us, and then we do it for your unit or department. But I'll probably have at least one a year, maybe two a year, to where we do it to where any military or law enforcement can come individually.
Cool.
And then I'm gonna try and get a stranglehold on just a few classes. So we're not gonna be offering just a large plethora. So the big one, the long one, that's 5 days. That's the minimalist travel. We'll probably wind up holding that 3 to 4 times a year. Like I said, that's 5 days long, and then we'll have some shorter classes that be like weekend classes. One of the classes that I do for that is called Weapons Without Bullets. So it's both hand to hand and so stick, knife, tomahawk, hatchet, hammer, whatever
you got.
Yeah, so basically the types of things that you would have readily available if you were out in the woods, things like that, and you didn't have a self-defense firearm or any firearm for that matter, and you had to defend yourself. So where this comes back to is a kind of a system that I've adapted from various things, but it's rooted in a baseline of things that can be easily trained and can be easily remembered. And it has a tendency to be able to, if you understand it, it has a tendency to be able to work with most handheld objects, right? And so, I mean, just, what was it? A couple of years ago, maybe, there were some hikers on the Appalachian Trail, got attacked, and a few of them died. Got attacked by some crazy dude. I think he had a machete or something,
Yeah, I remember that.
So
that hit national news.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's, one of the most dangerous animals out there are human beings.
Amen.
So the ability to defend yourself, whether or not you have a gun, is to me very important, right?
Yep.
And so we try to condense that into things that are, like I said, more easily transferred into the part of the brain that's going to remember that stuff. We will also do a short class called Practical Survival. The thing I really like about the Practical Survival class is that I use cell phones in it. Yeah, you heard that right. I might be the only survival instructor that I know of that actually incorporates cell phone use into one of their classes.
Well, you're the only off-grid guy that has a cell phone too, right?
Right. But I mean, really, realistically, you think about it. We live in 2021 now.
Yep.
Almost 22. Like, if you go anywhere with anything, you are probably going to have your cell phone on you, right? So it's not just a simplistic, like, okay, just dial 911, right? Because you might not have cell phone coverage, but there's a lot of other things you can do that make that tool that you're going to have with you anyway, make that a very valuable asset, and allow you to help. Allow it to help you. The other part about the Practical Survival class is that we kind of go through scenario of what a survival situation really actually looks like versus this movie that you've been playing in your head, right? So that incorporates injuries, that incorporates, moving around obstacles. And by obstacles, I don't mean like a tree that's, put up on a bunch of, other trees and you have to climb a rope. What I'm talking about is, mountains, rivers, things like that. How do I get from point A to point B and negotiate those obstacles without, further damaging myself? How do I move an injured person, or how do I, accomplish these tasks, right? And so it rapidly becomes, kind of a choose your own adventure course, and it's actually a really cool course, and that one's only like 3 days long. So so those three right now, plus the military and law enforcement one, are kind of our heart and soul at this point. And then, I obviously have a very strange background where, I know how to do a lot of different things, and I've taught a lot of different things over the years. So I also offer custom courses. So if somebody, once it has a group or, things like that, where they want to get a hold of me and say, hey, I want a little bit of this and I want a little bit of that. And I kind of customize those courses tailored to what that person or that group wants. And then I'll either they can come to me or I can travel to them, either way. But so that's kind of it, man. That's what we're about. Again, not doing the basic stuff, kind of taking it to that next level. The one thing I will say, and I've been meaning to put out a PSA on this, on the Facebook, and I just kind of keep forgetting. So just in case anybody's listening to this, and is interested in one of the courses, when you look on the courses, you may notice, if you kind of compare and contrast that to some of these basic courses that we're talking about, you may notice the price point is a little bit higher. And yeah, it is, because we're not dealing with, we're not dealing with basic stuff, right? So there's a lot more on the background that has to happen in order to facilitate these courses, right? But what I will say, for anyone, and I mean anyone that is actually wants the training, like if someone actually really wants the training, and you get a hold of me and you say, hey man, I really want to attend this course, we will figure something out. Like, you will not attend the course because of finances, right? So like, you've got something in your house to trade. You've got, like, if nothing else, like, I'll put you to work on the homestead, like whatever it takes. Like, if you really want the training, like, we will work with you. So I've been meaning to put that out, and I will put it out on Facebook, here in the next little bit. But I feel like that's one of the things. Like, we're at a point in this world where these skills could potentially, be very, very important here pretty soon. So I wouldn't feel right, if somebody was like, yeah, man, I really wanted this 5-day course, but I could only afford half of it, or whatever. Like, we'll figure something out, man. I'll put you to work. Put you to work moving rocks or something, so we'll
military style moving rocks, like move it here and then move it back. Or are you talking
no, you can move them at your own pace. I don't care, as long as they get moved. You get paid by the rock, though, not by the hour.
There you go. So will you be on site in West Virginia? Are you going to be, where are your core civilian courses going to be?
Yeah, so most of our courses will take place here. So depending on which course it is, some of them actually take place on our land, and then some of them we have to get permission to use, like parks and things like that, where it's a much bigger area, right? And but also I do traveling courses. This weekend, actually, I'm up in Pennsylvania teaching a long range shooting class, stuff like that. So there's the core of that. But by the same token, like I said, I do private and custom courses as well. So, but yeah, pretty much all the core classes will happen in and around where we're at in West Virginia. And then, if somebody prefers Especially people that are living in a vastly different area, say out west or in the desert or something. If they're living in a vastly different area and they're like, okay, yeah, great, but that doesn't really help me, survival wise, here because, my terrain is different, my vegetation is different, whatever, then it's probably more advantageous for me to come to you and teach you a course in your backyard. So those are a little bit more resource intensive sometimes because we got to find a place to do it and things like that. But yeah, like I said, we work with people, man.
Cool. That's good to hear. And you answered all my other questions. You said you're teaching a long range shooting course, which means that you do happen to have enough ammo to keep up on that skill. So good on you there.
I got people for that.
All right. Well, I really appreciate your time, and there's a whole bunch of unturned stones here that we could have gotten into, and maybe in the future if we can cross paths again, I think that would be fantastic.
Yeah, for sure.
I think as we're wrapping up, do you have any final thoughts or any last things that you would like to share and get out with anyone on any topic?
Trying to think. I don't have any burning compulsion really, but no, man, I appreciate having me. I wish you the best of luck on this. I hope it becomes something, and if nothing else, I hope it becomes something that you enjoy, or you find out that you don't enjoy it and you go do something else. But either way, I think that's a big thing. I said something that I think has been misunderstood, quite a bit when I left the show on my final episode. Kind of as I was leaving or whatever, I said, if something's preventing you from being happy, to get rid of it. And I think I said something about whether it was a relationship or a job or whatever. And I think some people kind of took that in a weird way that I didn't really mean it, right? So maybe that's what I'll end with, is that there's a difference between something preventing you from being happy and something not making you happy, right? So there's times in your life where I don't care whether it's your best friend, your wife, your husband, your dog, whatever, they are not going to be making you happy, right? They are not going to be like, just in it 120%, right? And so that's fine. That's a day. That's something you can get over. That's something that you can work toward, right? But when you find yourself stuck in these like toxic things, right? And I see this a lot with people's jobs, right? And especially with the way things are now, I'm not trying to encourage anybody to just quit their job, right? But when it comes to the difference between your mental well-being, right, and your job or whatever it is, like, choose yourself, choose your mental well-being, because nobody ever gets to their deathbed and is like, man, I really wish I would have worked like an hour more each day. Like, nobody says that. It's and it goes back to what we were talking about of like what we should be worried about versus what we do worry about. Enjoy your life. When I say enjoy your life, I don't mean like, oh, just waste all your money and go bungee jumping every weekend or whatever. Like, I'm not saying that as a fantasy. I'm saying like get to a place mentally where you can look at something beautiful and recognize it for being beautiful, where you can look at a flower or a mountainside or whatever, and you can take a second and you can say, man, this is awesome. Because if you're not doing that, if you're so worried about all these other things that shouldn't even exist really in the first place, that you can't take a moment and enjoy yourself, then what are you really doing? You're just existing, right? You're not doing anybody else any good. You're not doing yourself any good. You're just existing in this weird reality that we've created. And so I would just encourage, anybody that's listening and you and by proxy, I'm encouraging myself by saying this, but try to figure out how to actually enjoy your life in a deep way, not the random stuff that we do and we think like, oh, I'm enjoying this, hey, you're probably just, worrying about stuff without worrying about it, right? People say, oh, I enjoyed going shopping or whatever. Like, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. You just forced yourself to think that you needed to do that, right? But yeah. So I guess I'll wrap up with that. But no, man, I appreciate it, and like I said, I wish you all the best.
Well, you as well, and I'll put your Bear Mountain Facebook page in the description here, and as your website gets rolling, I'll get that updated and put it here as well, so people can find you. Justin, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your efforts and your willingness to talk with us today, and I wish you all the best of luck, and I'm sure that we'll be in touch in the future. So thank you so much, and you have a great day.
Hey, you too, man. Take care.
Take care. Bye. Just wanted to take a moment and thank Justin for taking the time to visit with us today. That was an incredible honor for me to be able to visit with him and hear from him and hear about his life and his experience. So Justin, thank you so much for taking that time. If you enjoyed listening to this episode today, I would appreciate it if you would take the time as well to subscribe to the channel. Go ahead and leave a comment on iTunes. Share this with anyone who you think might be interested in hearing from Justin and other individuals as we move forward.